What makes an empire truly powerful? Is it the sheer vastness of its land, the staggering size of its armies, or the permanent mark it leaves on the world? Throughout human history, the most formidable empires have done far more than merely conquer territory. They have shaped nations, forged civilizations, and dictated the cultural evolution of entire continents. Their legacy continues to echo through modern societies today. Let us embark on an epic journey through time to explore the top 10 most powerful empires ever to exist. This list ranks these colossal superpowers, not just by the millions of square miles they swallowed up, but by their relentless military prowess, their absolute economic strength, their sweeping cultural impact, and the legacy they left behind. These empires revolutionized the art of warfare, constructed massive infrastructure that survives to this very day, and fundamentally altered the trajectory of human events. We begin our countdown at number 10 with the Ottoman Empire, a sprawling leviathan that served as the ultimate bridge between East and West. From the year 1299 to 1922, the Ottomans cast a long and formidable shadow over the globe. Their story is one of ruthless ambition, brilliant administration, and unparalleled endurance. In the year 1453, the world watched in stunned disbelief as the Ottoman siege of Constantinople successfully shattered the impenetrable walls of the city. This catastrophic defeat marked the permanent fall of the Byzantine Empire. It was a pivotal moment in global history, leaving an indelible mark on the geopolitical landscape and sending shockwaves of panic throughout Europe. The Ottomans did not just conquer vast swaths of territory, they systematically clamped down on the most vital arteries of global commerce. They successfully linked the East and the West through a complex web of trade and aggressive diplomacy. At its absolute peak, the empire was a terrifyingly massive machine. It boasted a maximum land area of 5.2 million square kilometers. Within those sprawling borders lived 35 million people, representing a dizzying array of cultures, languages, and faiths. For a staggering duration of 623 years, the Ottoman sultans ruled with an iron fist. Their military strength was legendary, striking fear into the hearts of their enemies. During its peak era, the Ottoman war machine commanded a highly disciplined force of over 200,000 troops, including the elite and feared Janissary Corps. This military might was funded by an unmatched economic power. The empire maintained a tight, unbreakable grip over the major trade routes flowing between Europe and Asia. If you wanted to move silk, spices, or gold across the known world, you had to pay the Ottomans. Beyond their military and economic conquests, the Ottomans were brilliant architects of governance. They dominated the Mediterranean, transforming it almost into an Ottoman lake, which allowed them to control critical maritime trade routes. But perhaps their most outstanding achievement was the sophisticated system of governance they built to manage their vast and diverse population. During their reign, they established the millet system. This revolutionary legal framework allowed different religious communities to rule themselves under their own laws, ensuring a remarkable degree of stability across a deeply divided population. The Ottoman Empire was a masterclass in balancing sheer, overwhelming military force with pragmatic, tolerant administration. They set a standard for imperial endurance that few empires in human history have ever managed to rival. We now turn our eyes to the freezing, unforgiving expanses of Eastern Europe and Northern Asia to witness the rise of a true geopolitical juggernaut. Coming in at number 9 is the Russian Empire, an absolute powerhouse that swallowed continents, broke the wills of foreign invaders, and utilized the brutal forces of nature as its own personal weapon. From the year 1721 to 1917, the Russian Empire evolved from a secluded, landlocked realm into a global superpower with an insatiable, ravenous appetite for territory. Under the visionary and notoriously ruthless leadership of Peter the Great, the nation underwent a radical and forceful modernization. Peter dragged his country kicking and screaming onto the world stage, building a formidable navy from scratch and constructing the glorious city of St. Petersburg on the bones of countless laborers. During the subsequent Golden Age of Enlightenment, Catherine the Great pushed the borders further south and west, firmly cementing Russia as an indispensable player in global politics. This was not merely a military conquest of neighboring states. It was the conquering of the harshest, most deadly environments on the planet. The empire eventually stretched from the borders of Eastern Europe, straight across the frozen, desolate wilderness of Siberia, all the way to the rocky, crashing shores of the Pacific Ocean. Russia's sheer vastness and terrifying military might forged one of the most powerful and enduring empires the world had ever seen. Let us look at the staggering, almost incomprehensible scale of this winter leviathan. At its absolute peak, the Russian Empire controlled a mind-boggling maximum land area of 22.8 million square kilometers. Within this massive frozen domain lived a highly diverse population of 125 million people, ranging from nomadic tribes in the eastern steppes to aristocratic elites in the western palaces. For a continuous duration of 196 years, the Romanov Tsars ruled with absolute, unquestioned authority over a deeply complex and sprawling nation. Their economic power was undeniable, as they completely dominated Eastern Europe and relentlessly pushed their influence deep into Asia, securing vital resources, furs, and trade routes along the way. But it was the terrifying scale of the Russian military that truly cemented their status as a global titan. During its peak era, the Russian war machine commanded over 1 million soldiers. This was a seemingly endless wave of manpower, a brutal numbers game that could overwhelm and drown almost any adversary in a sea of bayonets and artillery fire. This military strength was tested against some of the greatest tactical minds to ever walk the earth. In the early 19th century, the brutal Russian winter and the sheer, unyielding grit of its army played a pivotal, decisive role in the catastrophic defeat of Napoleon Bonaparte. When the supposedly invincible French forces marched into the freezing depths of the Russian homeland, they were not met with a traditional surrender. Instead, they were met with scorched earth tactics, as the Russians burned their own villages and crops to deny the enemy any sustenance. When Napoleon reached Moscow, he found a city in flames, a stark realization that the Russian spirit could not be broken. The resulting French retreat through the freezing snow was an agonizing, devastating slaughter that fundamentally reshaped European geopolitics. Beyond the blood and ice of the battlefield, the Russian Empire established a fiercely strong bureaucratic system that managed its colossal territories. For centuries, this administrative iron grip maintained order across 11 different time zones, an administrative feat of epic proportions. By expanding relentlessly across 2 continents, the Tsars achieved an outstanding milestone. They successfully established the largest contiguous empire the modern world had ever witnessed. They built a dark, heavy legacy of endurance, incredible suffering, and absolute imperial dominance that forever altered the balance of global power. Imagine standing on the jagged edge of the known world, staring out into an endless, terrifying ocean. The Kingdom of Spain was hungry for wealth, desperate to bypass the traditional trade routes dominated by their eastern rivals. In the year 1492, the sails of 3 small ships pierced the horizon, carrying a daring explorer named Christopher Columbus, on a voyage that would permanently shatter the boundaries of human geography. His monumental arrival in the Americas triggered a ferocious wave of conquest and colonization that transformed Spain into an absolute, unstoppable juggernaut. During the subsequent age of exploration, the Spanish Empire ruthlessly forged a path of blood, steel, and unyielding ambition. The conquistadors arrived with roaring muskets, terrifying war horses, and a desperate hunger for ultimate glory. When figures like Hernán Cortés and Francisco Pizarro marched into the dense jungles and high mountains of the New World, they encountered massive, sophisticated empires. They decimated powerful ancient civilizations like the Aztecs and the Incas, stripping their grand temples of gold and claiming absolute dominion over a vast alien landscape. Spain did not just conquer these foreign lands, they completely devoured them, reshaping the very fabric of the continents they touched. The sheer volume of wealth extracted from the deep, treacherous earth was entirely unprecedented. Deep within the horrific silver mines of Potosi, located in modern-day Bolivia, indigenous laborers and enslaved people suffered under unimaginable brutal conditions. They chipped away at the dark, suffocating rock deep underground, extracting the precious metals that would soon fill the bellies of massive royal galleons. These legendary treasure fleets sailed heavily across the churning Atlantic, actively dodging deadly hurricanes and ruthless privateers who sought to steal the crown's glory. They successfully funneled staggering amounts of raw capital directly into the heart of Europe, enriching the Spanish monarchy beyond all reasonable measure. At its absolute zenith, this transcontinental behemoth covered a maximum land area of 13.7 million square kilometers. It was a staggering, sprawling domain that swallowed up massive portions of the Americas, stretched completely across the Pacific Ocean to the distant shores of Asia, and cast a heavy, intimidating shadow over European politics. Within this massive colonial apparatus lived a diverse, heavily controlled population of 50 million people. For a massive duration of 406 years, the Spanish crown ruled with an iron grip, utilizing the unimaginable wealth of the New World to finance endless military campaigns, massive armadas, and monumental building projects. The economic power of Spain was completely and utterly unmatched by any of its European rivals. By extracting millions of tons of silver and gold, they essentially created the very first iteration of a truly globalized economy. They did not stop at the edge of the Americas. The legendary Manila galleons sailed bravely across the vast Pacific, establishing a highly lucrative trade route that directly linked Acapulco to the Philippines. They traded heavy American silver for exotic Asian spices, fine silk and delicate porcelain, creating a closed loop of immense flowing wealth. From 1492 to 1898, this relentless pursuit of wealth and territory made Spain a terrifying titan of the seas. They established the very first truly global empire, a sprawling network of commerce and military outposts that stretched across 3 distinct continents. They completely revolutionized global commerce, connecting diverse lands that had been entirely isolated. For thousands of years, the populations of the Old World and the New World had never interacted. But Spanish galleons permanently shattered that barrier. This explosive, violent collision of worlds fundamentally changed the human diet, introducing new crops like potatoes and tomatoes to the rest of the globe. It drastically altered global economies and permanently shifted the distribution of power. By funding these perilous, daring voyages, Spain initiated the rapid, worldwide spread of its rich culture, its dominant language, and its uncompromising Catholic religion. They built a brutal, brilliant, and completely transformative empire that set the ultimate blueprint for global colonization. Today, their architectural and linguistic legacy still completely dominates Latin America, echoing the phrase is legendary, echoing around the globe with an air of absolute invincibility. The sun never set on the British Empire. This single sentence perfectly encapsulates the terrifying, unparalleled global reach of a small island nation that managed to conquer the world. We arrive at number 7 on our countdown, exploring the explosive maritime rise of the British Empire. In the year 1583, a daring English explorer named Humphrey Gilbert claimed the rugged shores of Newfoundland, planting the primary seed of a colossal global superpower. At that exact moment, a fierce and unyielding ambition ignited within the English crown to challenge the dominant Iberian powers and carve out their own massive slice of the globe. The British did not rely on massive land armies to secure their dominance. Instead, they looked out at the churning, unpredictable grey waters of the Atlantic and built a highly formidable, lethal navy. For centuries, the Royal Navy served as the absolute undisputed master of the oceans, a massive wooden wall of heavily armed ships that projected British power onto every single shore on Earth. Their strategy was brilliant, focusing heavily on seizing strategic choke points, establishing heavily fortified trading posts, and systematically suffocating their economic rivals. During the early stages of colonization, the British established a firm, unshakable foothold in the Americas and the Caribbean. They built highly lucrative sugar and tobacco plantations, fueled by the brutal, horrific realities of the transatlantic slave trade, pumping unbelievable wealth directly into the streets of London. This ruthless economic engine allowed them to completely dominate global commerce. At its absolute peak, this incredible maritime foundation expanded into the largest empire by sheer land mass, covering a mind-boggling maximum land area of 35.5 million square kilometers. Within this monumental, globe-spanning domain lived a staggering population of 458 million people. For a massive duration of 414 years, the British Crown exerted its heavy influence over a huge percentage of the human race. Their economic power was an unstoppable force of nature, allowing them to monopolize trade networks flowing out of India, Africa, and the Caribbean. Today, their enduring legacy in law, language, and culture still fundamentally shapes many powerful nations. In the beginning, their fierce naval supremacy successfully laid the unbreakable groundwork for total global dominance. They transformed a cold, rainy island into the beating, mechanical heart of an industrialized world. Imagine a force of nature so destructive, so terrifyingly fast, that entire civilizations believed the end of the world had arrived. We are at number 6, looking at a nomadic war machine that exploded out of the freezing, windswept plains of Central Asia. From the year 1206 to 1368, the Mongol Empire swept across the Eurasian landmass like a violent, unstoppable thunderstorm. Under the brilliant, completely ruthless leadership of Genghis Khan, a collection of fractured, warring tribes was forged into the ultimate weapon of conquest. They did not build massive stone fortresses or rely on slow, heavy infantry. Instead, they practically lived in the saddle, mastering the art of the composite bow and riding with a speed that left their enemies completely paralyzed with fear. When the Mongol hordes rode over the horizon, they brought an unprecedented wave of military success that completely rewrote the rules of engagement. Genghis Khan revolutionized warfare by perfecting rapid cavalry assaults, flawlessly coordinated flanking maneuvers, and devastating psychological warfare. The Mongol generals were masters of deception, frequently employing feigned retreats to draw heavily armored European and Middle Eastern knights into deadly traps. Once the enemy formation broke, the highly disciplined Mongol cavalry would wheel around and rain a storm of armor-piercing arrows down upon them. If a city surrendered immediately, the citizens were spared and absorbed into the massive, sprawling empire, often providing valuable engineers and craftsmen to the Mongol war effort. If they resisted the invasion, the Mongols unleashed absolute, merciless annihilation. They would divert rivers to flood fortified walls, use captured civilians as human shields, and leave nothing but mountains of ash and bone as a horrific warning to the next target. The estimated death toll of these brutal campaigns reached a staggering 30 to 40 million human beings. This was a level of destruction so massive that it actually cooled the global climate by drastically reducing the human population and allowing forests to regrow over abandoned farmlands. Yet, out of this unimaginable bloodshed came a unified, highly efficient superpower that valued loyalty and tactical merit above all else. At its absolute peak, this awe-inspiring empire controlled a maximum land area of 24 million square kilometers. This monstrous, continuous stretch of land was home to an estimated 100 million people, encompassing a massive variety of cultures, religions, and languages. For exactly 162 years, the descendants of Genghis Khan ruled over the largest contiguous empire in recorded human history. Their military strength relied on a relatively small but highly disciplined force of 100,000 to 200,000 warriors. This completely mobile army dominated everything from the crashing waves of the Pacific Ocean to the dense forests of Eastern Europe. Following the initial waves of destruction, a completely new era of global connection began to take shape across the conquered territories. During this historic age of peace, known as the Pax Mongolica, trade and cultural exchange flourished like never before. They actively facilitated the massive expansion of the Silk Road, providing heavily armed escorts for merchants and establishing a highly efficient relay system for rapid communication. By ensuring safe passage across their colossal territory, the Mongols effectively linked the economies of China, Persia, and Europe. This unprecedented security sparked a massive exchange of exotic goods, including gunpowder, paper, and silk, along with revolutionary technologies and radical new ideas between the East and the West. Today, we still feel the profound impact of this legacy that was written in blood but ultimately paved the way for our globalized, interconnected world. Consider for a moment the very foundation of Western civilization. Amanas, every road you drive on, every courtroom you enter, and every towering monument of stone owes a massive debt of gratitude to a single, relentless powerhouse. Coming in at number 5 on our countdown is the Roman Empire, a geopolitical titan that completely defined what it means to conquer and civilize a chaotic world. From the humble, swampy banks of the Tiber River, a small Italian city-state grew into the absolute master of the known world. The Romans were not just brutal conquerors, they were masterful architects of society who truly believed they had a divine mandate to bring order to the untamed wilderness. They marched out of the Italian peninsula with tightly packed legions of heavily armored infantry, wielding short swords and large shields with devastating, mechanical precision. Their military genius lay in their unparalleled discipline and their remarkable ability to adapt, absorb, and improve upon the tactics of their defeated enemies. When they encountered a superior weapon or a clever battlefield strategy, they did not reject it out of pride, but instead incorporated it directly into their own ruthless war machine. This lethal pragmatism allowed them to swallow the territories of the Greeks, the Carthaginians, and the Celts, transforming the Mediterranean Sea into what they proudly called Mare Nostrum, or Our Sea. From the year 27 BC to 476 AD, the Roman Empire maintained an iron grip over the entire Mediterranean basin and massive swathes of Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. During this incredible golden age of expansion, they built a civilization that was completely unrivaled in its complexity and its scale. Their economic power was absolute, controlling the most critical maritime and overland trade routes that connected the freezing forests of Britannia to the scorching deserts of Egypt. They funneled an endless river of grain, olive oil, wine, and enslaved people directly into the hungry, beating heart of Rome itself. At its absolute height, this monumental empire covered a maximum land area of 5 million square kilometers. Within these highly organized borders lived a sprawling population of 70 million people, all unified under the watchful gaze of the emperors and the terrifying shadow of the Roman legions. For 503 years, the emperors of Rome dictated the fate of millions, building a heavy legacy of stone and law that simply refused to die. To defend this vast territory, the Roman military boasted over 500,000 highly trained troops, stationed in massive stone fortresses along the heavily guarded frontiers. In the ancient world, these legionaries were not just soldiers, they were the premier engineers and builders of their era. Wherever the legions marched, civilization rapidly and forcefully followed. They carved out an incredibly extensive, highly durable network of stone roads that originally moved troops quickly, but ultimately served as the main arteries of global commerce and communication. During the peak of their imperial power, they constructed breathtaking aqueducts that defied gravity, carrying fresh water across vast distances to supply their sprawling, crowded cities. They built monumental colosseums, intricate public baths, and massive basilicas, utilizing their revolutionary invention of concrete to create structures that firmly stand to this very day. But perhaps the most enduring, outstanding achievement of the Roman Empire was not built with heavy stone or steel, but with brilliant ideas. They created a highly sophisticated, comprehensive system of Roman law. This intricate legal framework introduced groundbreaking concepts like the presumption of innocence and the right to a fair trial, forming the vital bedrock foundation for the legal systems of many modern nations. They established a strict military structure and a grand strategic vision that heavily influenced modern warfare, supply logistics, and political statecraft. In the year 476 AD, the western half of the empire finally collapsed under the crushing weight of barbarian invasions, economic ruin, and political corruption. However, the Eternal City had already successfully left a permanent, indelible blueprint on the entirety of human history. Far from the clashing steel of the Mediterranean and the frozen plains of Eastern Europe, an entirely different kind of imperial power was rising in the east. Coming in at number 4 on our countdown is the Qing dynasty, an absolute marvel of economic power and cultural preservation. In the year 1644, the Ming dynasty was drowning in rebellion and chaos, leaving the door wide open for the Manchu forces to thunder through the Great Wall and seize the mandate of heaven. They established a dynasty that would expand China's borders to their absolute greatest historical extent, successfully forging a massive multi-ethnic empire. The Qing emperors were not just military conquerors, they were brilliant administrators who perfectly balanced the brutal necessity of war with a deep, profound respect for traditional governance. During the 18th century, China effectively became the largest economy on the entire planet. This wasn't a fragile, paper-thin empire. It was an incredibly robust system, heavily based on Confucian principles of hierarchy and order. They established a massive, sophisticated bureaucracy that successfully managed one of the most densely populated regions on Earth without collapsing into chaos. At its absolute height, the Qing dynasty controlled an overwhelming maximum land area of 14.7 million square kilometers. This massive territory covered the bustling eastern coastline, swept straight across the deserts of Xinjiang, and completely engulfed the remote, treacherous mountains of Tibet. Within these borders lived an absolutely staggering population of 400 million people, a number that far exceeded any European empire of the era. For an impressive duration of 268 years, the Qing emperors ruled from the heavily fortified center of the Forbidden City. Their military strength was an undeniable force to be reckoned with, boasting well over 1 million soldiers perfectly organized into the legendary 8 banners. This disciplined force successfully defended China's massive borders and fiercely repelled any outside attempt to destabilize the region. But the true, undeniable power of the Qing dynasty was heavily rooted in its economic dominance and its rich, vibrant culture. They completely monopolized the lucrative tea and porcelain trade, drawing massive amounts of silver directly into their treasury from European merchants who were absolutely desperate for Chinese luxury goods. In a time when the West was just beginning to industrialize, the Qing emperors actively fostered incredible achievements in literature, science, and monumental engineering projects. They built an incredibly wealthy, sophisticated, and heavily fortified society that believed itself to be the true center of the world. Long before the legions of Rome marched out of Italy or the Mongol hordes swept across the Eurasian steppe, an ancient world was shaped by an empire of breathtaking vision and unprecedented tolerance. Let us journey back to the very cradle of civilization and consider the Achaemenid Persian Empire. Rising to power in the dusty plains of modern-day Iran, it fundamentally redefined what an empire could be, offering a compelling alternative to the brutal subjugation that characterized so many ancient conquests. The narrative begins in the year 550 BC. A brilliant leader named Cyrus the Great overthrew the Median rulers and began forging an empire unlike anything the world had ever witnessed. It wasn't built entirely on bloodshed. It was founded on a remarkable, pragmatic philosophy of tolerance and inclusion. Cyrus did not burn the cities he conquered. Instead, he famously ordered his troops to respect local customs and religions. He established a reputation as an enlightened ruler, famously declaring that all people under his vast domain had the right to self-determination. In 539 BC, when his armies famously entered the mighty city of Babylon, Cyrus did not sack it. He actively permitted the Jewish people, who had endured a long and bitter captivity, to return to their ancestral homeland and rebuild their temple in Jerusalem. This was an unprecedented act of political calculation and genuine statesmanship, creating a sprawling, multi-ethnic society where diversity was embraced as a strength rather than crushed as a threat. The scale of this ancient Persian superpower was absolutely staggering. At its absolute zenith, the Achaemenid Empire encompassed a maximum land area of roughly 5.5 million square kilometers. This massive territory spanned 3 continents, stretching from the Indus River Valley in the east, all the way across the Middle East, diving down into the Nile Valley in Egypt, and pushing deep into the eastern edges of Europe. Within these immense borders, An estimated population of over 50 million people flourished, a truly staggering figure for antiquity. The Persians understood that maintaining control over such a massive, diverse population required more than simply posting soldiers in every corner. It required revolutionary infrastructure. Therefore, they constructed the legendary Royal Road, an incredible highway that stretched over 2,500 kilometers from Susa in Elam to Sardis near the Mediterranean coast. It was heavily fortified, diligently maintained, and featured relay stations placed at exact intervals, providing fresh horses and riders to rapidly transmit royal decrees. Thanks to this brilliant network, a message could travel from one end of the empire to the other in less than 9 days, a speed that seemed almost magical to ancient observers. Militarily, the Persians were an absolute juggernaut. At its height, the Persian war machine could reportedly field over 1 million soldiers, drawn from every corner of their vast empire. Their armies were a fascinating patchwork of different cultures, fighting side by side under the command of Persian generals. Among their most feared units were the famous Immortals, an elite force of exactly 10,000 heavily armed and meticulously trained shock troops. When one Immortal fell in battle, he was instantly replaced, ensuring the unit always appeared invincible to the enemy. But beyond the battlefields and massive building projects, the true genius of the Achaemenid Empire lay in its political structure. To manage a dominion of this scale, they pioneered a brilliant federal system. They divided their empire into massive provinces known as satrapies, each governed by an appointed official known as a satrap. These satraps possessed significant autonomy, managing local taxes and maintaining order, while remaining utterly subservient to the great king in Susa. This sophisticated approach to imperial administration would heavily influence nearly every empire that followed. For a solid duration of 220 years, the Persian kings ruled over a realm of unmatched wealth, stability, and cultural vibrancy. They cultivated an environment where art, architecture, and religious thought blossomed in spectacular fashion, establishing a template for a cosmopolitan society. The Achaemenid Persian Empire proved that an empire could be forged not just through overwhelming terror, but through the careful, strategic management of diversity, creating an enduring legacy that still resonates powerfully today. In the vast expanse of world history, there are few phenomena as explosive or as profound as the sudden, overwhelming emergence of the Islamic Caliphate. We are at number 2, examining an empire born from faith, forged in the brutal heat of the desert, and destined to rewrite the cultural and scientific destiny of the world. Our story officially begins in the year 6061. In the chaotic aftermath following the death of the Prophet Muhammad, the Islamic Caliphate surged outward with terrifying speed and divine ambition. What started as an isolated religious movement quickly transformed into one of the most powerful, expansive, and influential empires the world has ever seen. The Arab armies did not rely on heavy siege engines or slow-moving infantry. They relied on sheer mobility, unshakable belief, and the legendary speed of their desert cavalry. They swept across the Middle East with lightning speed, conquering ancient Persian strongholds and driving deep into Christian Byzantine territories. Soon, their armies were pushing rapidly across the dusty, unforgiving expanses of North Africa, their gaze fixed firmly on the wealth of the Mediterranean. It was an expansion that seemed completely unstoppable. In a matter of decades, they had successfully pushed the boundaries of the Caliphate straight into the heart of the Iberian Peninsula in Europe. At its most spectacular peak, the Islamic Caliphate commanded an absolutely monumental maximum land area of 13.5 million square kilometers. From the hot, dry winds of the Atlantic coast in the west to the dense, humid valleys of the Indus River in the east, the Caliphate spanned 3 distinct continents. Within this massive, sun-baked domain lived an incredibly diverse population of 100 million people. They successfully unified Arabs, Persians, Egyptians, and countless other ethnicities under the unifying banner of a single faith and a single, dominant language. For an astonishing duration of 597 years, the caliphs ruled as both political monarchs and supreme religious authorities. Their military strength was incredibly formidable. Their highly disciplined and rapidly mobile forces struck fear into their enemies, with some historical estimates suggesting they commanded up to 1 million soldiers. However, the greatest legacy of the Islamic Caliphate is not measured by the millions of miles they conquered or the armies they decimated. The true, lasting impact of this empire lies in its magnificent cultural and intellectual contributions. During the legendary Golden Age of Islam, the Caliphate became the unquestioned intellectual epicenter of the entire planet. Under the Abbasid Caliphate in particular, the city of Baghdad blossomed into a thriving metropolis of learning. They established the iconic House of Wisdom, a massive library and translation center that actively gathered knowledge from the Greeks, the Persians, and the Indians. While Europe was slowly sinking into the Dark Ages, Islamic scholars were creating incredible, revolutionary advancements. They pioneered complex fields like algebra and trigonometry. Islamic astronomers accurately mapped the stars, while medical pioneers completely revolutionized the practice of medicine with advanced surgical techniques and the creation of the first true hospitals. To manage this sprawling, culturally wealthy empire, they built a complex and highly advanced administrative structure that successfully maintained order and facilitated immense trade for centuries. They created a thriving, interconnected world that bridged the ancient and medieval eras. The Islamic Caliphate was an intellectual powerhouse that fundamentally shaped the trajectory of human progress, ensuring that their legacy would echo loudly throughout history. The journey through the world's most formidable empires reaches its pinnacle with a power that permanently altered the global landscape, profoundly shaping the very world we live in today. At number 1 on our countdown stands the British Empire, not just an empire of conquered lands, but the grand architect of modern globalization. This isn't just about naval dominance in the Caribbean or colonial administration in the Americas. This is about absolute global hegemony. Let us look at the British Empire at the absolute height of its power. As the Industrial Revolution exploded in Britain during the 18th and 19th centuries, the nation transformed into the undisputed workshop of the world. This colossal, unprecedented economic engine demanded massive quantities of raw materials and ever-expanding markets for its manufactured goods. The Royal Navy, having crushed its rivals at Trafalgar, reigned completely unchallenged over the oceans, fiercely protecting the island's global network of colonial possessions and strategic trade routes. By the dawn of the 20th century, the scale of the British Empire was almost incomprehensible. Let's look closely at the terrifying statistics. At its absolute zenith in 1920, the British Empire encompassed an astonishing maximum land area of roughly 35.5 million square kilometers. That is an astonishing quarter of the Earth's total landmass. It stretched from the cold, frozen expanses of Canada down to the vast Australian outback, from the tropical wealth of the Caribbean directly across to the bustling, heavily populated subcontinent of India, and deeply into massive swaths of the African continent. The sheer extent of this domain gave rise to the iconic yet very accurate phrase, "the empire on which the sun never set." No matter the hour, somewhere on Earth, British subjects were awake beneath the Union Jack. Within these sprawling territories lived a staggering population of approximately 458 million people. That was a full 25% of the entire human race living under a single imperial crown. The administration of such a vast and diverse population was a monumental, deeply complex effort, marked heavily by the brutal economic exploitation of colonial subjects and indigenous populations. The economic power of the British Empire was completely unparalleled. Through institutions like the brutal, powerful East India Company, Britain successfully drained massive wealth from India, transforming a wealthy, ancient civilization into an impoverished exporter of raw materials. This immense wealth actively fueled British financial supremacy and financed an unparalleled military dominance. Their navy was not only an instrument of war, it was the global police force of maritime commerce, firmly ensuring that British interests were respected from Singapore to the Suez Canal. The empire's legacy is a profound, incredibly complex web that is still deeply felt today. They fundamentally revolutionized the world's economy through their iron grip on global trade. However, it is essential to remember that this empire was forged and maintained through devastating military conquest, intense political suppression, and economic dominance that left deep, enduring scars on the lands they colonized. Despite the darker realities of its rule, the outstanding achievements and enduring impact of the British Empire are simply undeniable. They laid the physical, critical groundwork for international communication networks. They established English as the primary, undisputed language of global business and diplomacy. Many nations today still operate utilizing legal frameworks derived directly from the British common law system. The British Empire was a titan of commerce, a master of the oceans, and a relentless engine of transformation. Whether viewed with deep admiration or severe criticism, its absolute dominance over the globe makes it the most powerful and influential empire in human history.